Well, I think we might be live right now. So if we are, good afternoon and welcome along to another conversation, live youth work conversation. It is Tuesday, the 21st of July. My watch says it's just gone 2 o'clock. So sorry that we're a little bit late. Computers are being sluggish, but we promised to give you a good nearly hour thereabouts of stimulating and exciting conversation around our theme today, which is relational discipleship, and particularly looking at how relational discipleship has or hasn't been possible during our lockdown times here over the last 4 months or so. My name's Mike, but I'm going to pass over to now. Which side are you, Dawn? I don't know if you're this side or this side. I think you're that side, but we'll find out in a minute. Dawn is going to just help us get to know who we are, and then we'll dive into our conversation.
I have no idea where I am on the screen. You're like below me on my screen. So hello, everybody. My name is Dawn. I'm one of the children youth work advisors over at the Leeds Diocese. So we just want to introduce everybody. So Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself, who you are and where you come from?
Yes, so I'm Hannah Robinson and I'm a youth and family worker in Doncaster and the youth hub coordinator. So we do half-term events for lots of youth groups joining together.
Fantastic. And Chloe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Chloe and I go to a youth group in Doncaster.
Fantastic. And Mike, do you want to introduce? You didn't introduce yourself very well, so do you want to introduce yourself again?
And I can just see that actually you are down there. So I'm Mike. I'm the Children's and Young People's Advisor for the Diocese of Sheffield. Now, I think it's fair to say as well that Chloe is one of Hannah's members of your youth group, isn't it? So that's an extra connection there. So
it is. That's fantastic. So this is a time when we always play a little bit of a game. So a couple of weeks, people have set the bars a bit high by making you run around the house and have car keys and cheese and all sorts of things. But we're going to play an old kind of youth game that probably we've all played at some point. So I asked you beforehand to email me a random fact about yourself. So I'm going to read all 4 out and you have to guess which person the random fact belongs to. They are quite random. Okay, so I've written them on my phone.
Don't give it away if it's yours. Is that
I won't. Don't give it away. Okay, so the first random fact is I grew up in America. The second random fact is I have a Blue Peter badge. The third random fact is I have been known to wear the same pair of jeans for more than 2 weeks without washing them. And then the final fact is I have been to Africa twice. Have anybody got any clues as to who they might be? Don't give your own away.
One of those facts, I know it's not mine, but it could be mine.
Yeah, they are.
The jeans one, I'm going to take a guess at Mike.
Do you think that might be Mike?
Oh, smelly jeans. Smelly jeans.
Chloe nodded then. Do you think it's Mike as well?
Yeah.
Mike, is the jean fact yours?
Of course it is. Yeah. Absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with wearing jeans for at least 2 weeks, unless you spill something on them. But yeah, no, it's good for the environment as well, I think, not washing your clothes. I feel that this hole is getting deeper and deeper.
We'll let the comments decide what the judgment on
how long will you
often
go without washing your jeans?
That's it. That's the question. So we've got I've been to Africa twice. I've got a Blue Peter badge, and I grew up in America. So who do those facts belong to?
I know them by process of elimination, so I'm going to give someone else a go.
Okay.
I'm kind of out now because I've been outed. My jeans have been outed, so I'm wondering if the America one is. I really don't know, but I'm going to go for Dawn.
Yeah.
It is me. So my mum is American, so we went to live there for a little while I was growing up, and then we moved back to England, and I had a very heavily American accent, and I went to school and got completely picked upon because I had this American accent. So then I switched to a heavy Nottingham accent overnight and lost my Americanism really quickly.
Which leaves us with what last two facts were they?
Someone's got a Blue Peter badge, and someone has been to Africa twice. So which girl is it? Which person?
It seems I'm the only one on the screen who doesn't know. I'm gonna go that Blue Peter badge is Hannah. Am I pointing in the right direction?
You are correct. Proud owner of the badge.
Which
Do you want
means
to give him?
Chloe's been to Africa twice. Wow.
I'm going again at Christmas.
Oh my goodness.
What takes you to Africa?
My stepdad.
Ah, how about that? Wow, what an excellent excuse to like travel the world. And brilliant.
That's very cool. And Hannah, I've got to ask, what Blue Peter badge is it?
It's just the bog standard one. I mean, it wasn't very exciting. I wrote a letter and drew a picture when I was 9 and modelled myself on Katie Hill at the time. I've used it to get in places free though.
I love it. And do you know, during lockdown, actually, loads of people have been applying for Blue Peter badges. Like loads, it's been this thing at the moment. So there you go. You can apply for more Blue Peter badges.
Places for free, yeah.
Definitely. That's awesome. Thank you for playing the random question game. Woohoo! Right, we're just going to get all serious. We're just going to pray before we start the conversation. So, Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity to come together and share in a conversation. Lord, please guide our conversations. Give us your wisdom and insight as we start to talk about these topics. Help us to find authentic, relational ways to connect with young people. Lord, help us shine your light out to others around us. Thank you that we are free to share the good news over social media. And give us fresh boldness to speak out your love to the world around us. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Right, Mike, I'll hand over to you.
Andy, you were wrong. I was not the Blue Peter badge holder. Right, well, I'm a big believer in relational discipleship. And for me, it's like one of the core values of youth work. If you're going to do youth work, get the fact that relationship is what it's really all about. And when we thought as a team planning our various conversations, we thought about the term relational discipleship. There was one youth worker particularly who came to mind, and that is Hannah. So that's why we've especially invited Hannah. And Hannah very kindly invited Chloe to come and be a part of the conversation as well. So I want to come to both of you first of all, and just to help us get our minds into the conversation, could you give us what your understanding is of relational discipleship? What does that look like? What does it mean? Maybe from both of your points of view, that'd be great. Great place to start.
Yeah, so for me, when I began youth work, employed 4 years ago, but voluntary before that, my core kind of aim was to make sure my youth work invested in individual young people. I was determined that I would know them by name, that I would know their hobbies, their interests, their backgrounds, their families, and that they wouldn't just be a number to me. They'd be a person with a history and all kinds of different things with them. And the reason I do youth work is because one person or multiple individuals took time and effort to invest in me. So it was my goal that my youth work would follow that. So it's investing in a young person as themselves, and no one size fits all. But meeting them where they're at and journeying with them on their, not just their faith journey, but their life journey and the whole young person. So not just the hour and a half on a Friday night at youth group, but their whole life. So like this week, for example, Chloe won't mind sharing. Chloe's not got a printer at home, but has got coursework to do. So it's printing off that coursework to help Chloe at college. It's not just the faith slot on a Friday night, but it's investing in the whole person and their faith journey as part of their life journey.
Sounds more than just a job to me. Chloe, let's come to you. What are your thoughts about the importance of having that kind of relationship, discipleship in your life?
I think like having a relationship with a youth worker is like you've got that guidance. It's like you've got the input of an adult, and you've got that sort of person to go to if you've not got anyone else to go to. And it's sort of like, it's like another parent, to be honest. That's what I see Hannah as, like another parent, and like helping me through everything. Like if I can't go to a certain person, I go to Hannah. And it's just like that backlash of someone, like to have someone else to go to and to trust.
And something outside of the family setting, I think sometimes is really key, isn't it, to have somebody who doesn't know maybe the arguments that have gone on or the things that have gone on at home, but that you can go to. And Hannah plays that role now. Is Hannah available to you all the time, or does she set some boundaries? What kind of rules are there in this relationship? Are there any?
Do you want a hint? Think about like social media and group chats we've got. What are the rules in place there? And
yeah, like we've got a group chat, but we've also got like another adult in it. So that's like whenever we meet in like small groups, there's always like another adult with us.
Yeah.
So
safely. Hannah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's sharing life together, but sharing it in a professional way, but also being authentic and available, but with the boundaries in place. So the group chats we have, it's time-wise, so probably 9 a.m. till very cut off at the latest is 10 p.m. and that's kind of the phone's off and they know that. It's boundaries about what can be discussed, and there's always another adult. So we have big group chats for the whole youth group, but then we have individual ones with each young person, but that's me and another adult in. And I suppose it's, the safeguarding's at the forefront, because I think that's safeguarding's at the foundation of relational ministry, isn't it? You want to protect the people you love and care for. So there's definitely boundaries in place in terms of what's appropriate to talk about and timings and adults. And I think doing ministry like this at the moment, as things are, that's even more obvious and even more important at the moment as well.
Dawn, tell us a little bit about your experience of sort of the important relationships with young people that you had over the years.
Yeah, definitely. I like something that Hannah said a little while ago. She talked about it being multiple individuals, that it wasn't just one person. So I remember growing up and having loads of kind of people in church that I would call my aunties. And then when you were talking to your friends, you'd be like, oh, but it's not my actual auntie. It's like my church auntie. They'd be like, what do you? And I think that's so important, that we don't just rely heavily on the paid youth worker. That actually as a whole church, we come together and we say, do you know what? We're going to authentically live out faith. We're going to get to know you. We're going to get to know who you are. So when my children were growing up, they didn't have a dad around, so we had a paid youth worker. So knowing that the youth worker was heavily relied upon, we kind of looked for other kind of role models within the church that we could approach and say, hey, would you like to journey alongside my children? And everyone said yes. And we kind of put boundaries in place, because we want to make sure that we have safe boundaries in there as well. And they just kind of loved upon my children, showed them what it meant to be a Christian, and kind of just really authentically lived alongside them, continually checked on them. And it was fantastic. And that's what I try and do, both as a youth worker and also in the whole of my life, really, is just to get to know those people. I think it's so important.
So do we think actually, as far as a term goes, relational discipleship, we shouldn't actually really need to say relational, because is there any other way of doing discipleship? I feel sometimes, if you're a youth worker who thinks about what they do, engages with their Bible, and is trying to do what God wants them to do, then there isn't any other way of doing it, is there?
To me, there's not. No, I think you can't. How can you possibly discipleship without a relationship? And the sense of belonging, in terms of if you don't invest in that relationship, why would a young person come back to youth group where they get the discipleship? So it's hand in hand to me.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at Jesus's ministry and how much time he spent with his disciples. He lived and breathed and walked and ate with them. Everything was done in relationship. It wasn't just come to me once a week and I'll tell you stuff. It was, let's live this and let's walk this together. So absolutely, they go hand in hand.
I'm interested to explore a little bit the boundary side of that, because I know as a youth worker, I've sometimes felt that I want to be able to say to my young people, you know, you need to ring me. And I know there's a lot of young people, a lot of youth workers who will say that, and they'll say to their young people, look, this is my mobile number. If you need to ring it, no matter what time of day. But there's the part of me that says also to protect your personal space and to have those guidelines in place. So how strong or firm do our guidelines need to be? Obviously, safeguarding plays a huge role in this. Hannah, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the hardest time I find it is on holiday. Is when I'm off and stepping away. It's very hard to leave so I have a work phone, which I think helps with the boundaries of this is the time I'm available, this is the time when I'm not, but it also keeps all work stuff on one phone, so keeping messages and such. But that's a time where I find it really difficult to take a step away, because I think, what if this happens? And I remember I was at Soul Survivor last year, and Soul Survivor ended last year, and they were sharing that was the reason why they would find it so hard, was to step away from the young people. And they were saying, but actually they're not our young people. So Chloe's not my young person, she's God's young person, and that God will look after the young people when I can't. And as much as I want to be available to them, I know that I can't pour in an empty cup. So I know that I need to step away. But it is really hard. I think when you're a youth worker, it's a life choice. It's not a job, or to me, it's not. And I care and love deeply for all the young people I work with. So it's really hard. But I think for me to be a good youth worker, I need to have good boundaries in place to protect myself and them. So it's by no means easy, but it's important.
Yeah. I'm curious, Chloe, have there been times in the past when those sort of boundaries that Hannah's set in place, you've kind of come up against them and think, oh, it's just gone 10 and I really need to have a conversation, or she's on holiday? And are there times when those boundaries are hard, or do you kind of see the reason for them?
I see the reason why they're there, but then sometimes I'll have I'm quite an emotional person. So I'll have one of them times and I was like, oh no, I need Hannah, but she's not allowed.
Yeah,
I'll get that all the time.
It's also important to point out as well that it's not just me, that there's me and a team of volunteers, and the team sometimes aren't as accessible due to work and things. But if I'm on holiday, the other adults will always take over the group chats and things, so they're not left on their own. And it's by no means relying on me. I can't solve everything at all. It's a team effort.
Yeah. What would we say are the key ingredients of a good relational discipleship youth worker? We've given a few of those kind of ideas: being available. Hannah, you very helpfully went through a number of things, but are there, what is good to do as a youth worker that fosters and nurtures relational discipleship? What kind of things should you be involved with? Who wants to kick off?
I think I'll start off with the obvious, just being authentic. That Hannah very rightly said, I don't have the answer to everything. And actually, we don't. Nobody has the answer to everything. And just being really authentic and honest, and actually walking alongside that young person and the young people that you're with, or the youth workers, whoever you're in your world. Authenticity is so important, so important. Just saying, actually, let's journey this together. Let's do this together. They always say that the youngest person in a church is attracted to the oldest person who's the most authentic, who's the most interested in them. So authenticity, I think, is one of the key things.
Yeah. Anyone else got words, or even how do you break down that word of authenticity? What does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think for me it's being open. So I will happily share my testimony with the young people, because I think that's such an important thing of, how did you become a Christian? Because by no means it was an easy pathway. But being willing to learn together. So if they ask me a question, I ain't got a Scooby because I haven't got a degree in theology or anything. And then it's to be honest and say, well, actually, I don't know, but can I research or talk to someone and find out and come back to you? And being honest about that as well. So it's not putting on a front of, I know everything. And I think a big part of that is they know that I rely on God to help me with everything. And it's always bringing it back to that. Is the reason I do youth work is not so I get a nice little happy buzz that my young people are happy, but it's for God, and it all comes back to that. So I think for me, it's authenticity is massive, but also the boundaries that we spoke about, kind of expectations as well. So if the young people have asked us to put on a weekly youth group, but then they're not coming, but they asked for it, it's kind of a bit, oh, come on guys, you asked for this. So yeah, boundaries, expectations, and learning together and bringing it all back to God and why we're doing what we're doing.
Nice. Wonder what it looks like from the other end a bit more. Come to you, Chloe, on this, as somebody who has a team, Hannah and others around you who are available to walk with you and to listen and to work things out. What are the things that are really important for you? Is it just having somebody to listen to you, or are there other things that are really key for you?
Like giving advice, because a lot of youth workers obviously give good advice because they've obviously been through quite a lot of things, and like it's sort of like knowing their experience, and then we can sort of like relate to that experience. So like they give good advice, like of what to do.
Yeah, and share their story by the sounds of it as well. And you know, if we're talking about sort of safeguarding boundaries, there's also that side of things with how much do you share? How much of your life do you share with the young people? Are there areas that are just out of bounds? And if so, how important is it to think that through before starting, if you like, with a youth group? To think actually there are certain parts of my life that either are not comfortable with talking about in front of a youth group, and there might be other more personal parts of my life where it's just inappropriate for me to talk about with my young people. But there's also some things that we might be ashamed of, or we might be embarrassed about, but they were big lessons for us in our past, that maybe those are key things to share about. Do people think that's about right, or agree with that in any way? Any examples or stories without crossing your own personal boundaries?
Yeah, I think it's being open and honest and sharing, but also if you know you're sharing a subject which might be hard to hear for a young person, or it might be, so for me, anxiety played a huge part of my life for a number of years in my, well, as a teenager and early 20s to still now. And I share that, but I also make sure in me sharing my story that the young people aren't just left with that. But if it's, I don't know, if it brings something up, then they know that there's support out there and directing them to that. So I think it's been knowing what you're willing to share about yourself, what you can deal with mentally yourself sharing, obviously the boundaries in what's right to share, but also the impact of what you're sharing with the young people to make sure they're not just going home on a Friday thinking what Hannah spoke about, that's me, but you're directing them somewhere. So I think it's definitely right that we share, and definitely right that things are kept personal, but also handle it in the right way as well.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because so often we can do that, can't we? We can sometimes feel really comfortable about sharing past mistakes, but it's almost kind of like dropping that bomb and just going, right, this happened, and then walking away and everyone like, what hang on a second. So that's really important, making sure that there is the support around people when you're sharing vulnerable stuff. Absolutely.
Anyone got any thoughts or lights to shine on the whole one-to-one sort of conversations and that sort of more intimate relational discipleship that you might do in like a mentoring setting against the youth group, or even just a small group? Is it different? Does it look different? What can you do in one that maybe you can't do in the other? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think as a big youth group, so our big youth group is usually a Friday, that's a lot more kind of everyone orientated, and it's big and there's activities and things, but there's still space for people to talk if they need to. But then the actual so it might be a 5-minute quick chat, but I'll also make sure that I follow that up during the week with a message or with another adult in and things. But for us, our conversations happen in so we do a fortnightly discipleship group, and that's where those kind of deep conversations happen. Or it's we've done before some small groups, we've done some small girls groups, and we've done one-to-one mentoring in a public place, but then we've also done 2 adults with 1 young person in church and things. But for me, it's often when you least expect it that these conversations happen. So obviously it's intentional at our Tuesday group, but then if a young person is visibly upset about something at the Big Friday youth group, then I'll make sure that they don't leave until they've spoken to someone, and that's followed up throughout the week. So if Chloe came to me and said, Hannah, I've got this happening this week, I'm really nervous, can you pray? Then on the day I'll make sure I'll write a little note saying pray, but I'll message Chloe with Sheila and say we're praying for you, but then also make sure afterwards we catch up and ask. So it's investing, but yeah, I think the conversations can happen anywhere, but there's obviously more intentional ones, but then there's ones that happen kind of just naturally. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I can't remember the question, but it was
I think
full of wisdom.
I think mentoring is always seen as kind of like the pinnacle of youth work, that we love the idea of mentoring, but actually in reality it's really hard work. So it's really, you have to be really intentional about meeting, you have to be ready to have setbacks, you have to invest so much time, but actually the rewards are so great when we know that youth work's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but mentoring is like the mega marathon, the Ironman. You really do have to. I've mentored people for several years, and you do invest and you invest and you invest, but the rewards are so great from it, in terms of seeing the way that the young person flourishes, and also the relationship that you unexpectedly have with that young person as well, or with that person that you're meeting, flourishes and grows as a result. So it's definitely worth doing, worth the Ironman marathon, not sprint. Definitely.
I think mentoring is great, but there's also, it can, like you say, it's really hard, which is why it comes back to the boundaries in place. I know that after a mentoring session I need a half an hour coffee on my own to process what we've chatted about, and but also it's not the be all and end all. So if you really struggle with it, so if we have a booked session in, that's kind of right, I know in a week's time I've got to be vulnerable with Hannah. Oh no, and what if on that day they really don't want to at all, which is why I think it's being willing to have those conversations when they just naturally happen. So I could get more out of a 5-minute conversation on a Tuesday than perhaps in a half an hour booked mentoring session, where actually on that day that young person's thinking, I'd rather be at home because today I don't want to talk. I wanted to talk on Friday, but I couldn't. So I think, it's mentoring is great, but it's also being open to it happening kind of organically as well.
Definitely. It's kind of like when people say to you in church, how are you doing? You're like, yeah, I'm okay. But you don't just open up naturally, do you? You have to create a relationship with somebody first. So it's so important. I know mentoring sessions can be a bit full on, and it can almost feel like I've got to answer questions, and it can seem really unnatural. But once, like you say, once you've built up that relationship with those really kind of informal conversations, it definitely flows a lot better. Definitely.
It's hard as well.
Go on,
Mike. So obviously we want to protect ourselves and our young people with safeguarding, which often means mentoring needs to take place in a public place, and for us, the 2 churches I'm in are in villages, and there's not a lot out there, so it's a local coffee shop for us, which you get an inappropriate conversation next to you, and then you suddenly spend the whole mentoring session like, oh no. But that's a lot of the time it comes to, is the space to be able to mentor properly. And then if you do it in church, so you have another adult that's just photocopying or making a brew or just sat doing something else but can still hear, then it's just awkward. So it's finding the right balance of making it work for everyone, which is one of the hardest challenges, I think.
Definitely.
I've more than once started a conversation like in a coffee shop, and either the conversation has got to a point where I can see like the young person's uncomfortable because there might be other people listening, or like you say, Hannah, there's another conversation that's quite loud next to you or whatever else, and we've just gone for a walk. because again, it's still that public place and it's still out and about, but it's just like you just walk around the block or whatever. But that space is so important, isn't it, to be able to say to the young person, and also for the stuff that you might want to share as well. Should we just go for a walk, and then it might be a little bit easier to chat for a bit. And those kind of little ideas, we shouldn't be tied to the fact, well, I've got to do my hour in Mackie D's, whatever it is, and it's got to be between these times because that's what I've agreed with the parent or whatever. But it is a case of thinking, right, in this moment, this conversation is dead because it can't happen here. But this is a really, like you say, sometimes the conversation comes up, and if you don't do it then, it might not ever happen. So get out, go for a walk, have that conversation, and go that way. I was going to say there's been a couple of good comments on the stream here. Somebody talking about the power of testimonies and having testimonies, having your own stories at hand, and being ready and willing to give those honestly, and also accountability. Something I don't know if anyone's mentioned yet, but just the importance of as a youth worker, not just holding young people to account, say, right, so you've promised me that you're going to read your Bible or pray or you're going to do these things, but actually having that as that two-way agreement. And as youth worker saying, well, actually, I've got challenges as well. I've got discipleship challenges of myself, which I'm trying to work on as well. So would you keep me accountable? So next time we meet, I'll ask you about this thing that you've wanted to have a go at. But can you ask me? I give you permission. And I think, again, that can show a real value of that relationship. At least that's my experience. I have a number of young people who are now grown up because I've been in this for a while. Young people that were young people 20 years ago. And they've got their own families now, but we still have quite a close connection because we've had those coffee shop hours put in, years ago. And we feel we kind of have that permission into each other's lives, and that's precious and super valuable. And I think a youth worker who's ever seen some of that fruit at the other end, will forever wave the flag for relational discipleship and say it's worth it. It's messy and hard at times, but it's super worth it. Does anyone else ring true with that? Dawn, how long have you been a youth worker?
Oh, over 20 years, like you might. I know I only look 29.
Let's join a club.
So a long time. But it is true, isn't it, that the relationships that you had are always special, no matter how old you get. Definitely.
Let's change gears slightly for the second part, because we'd be crazy to ignore the fact that we have been in a lockdown situation, and we are talking about relational discipleship. How does that work when you can't actually meet up, and you certainly you couldn't do any one-to-one stuff? Everyone was told to stay at home. So I wonder, from Hannah and Chloe's point of view, what happened when lockdown hit, as far as your relationship with youth worker, young person? How did you keep that going, or did you? But also, how is it now changing as lockdown starts to ease?
Yeah, so it's certainly a time of thinking, oh no, what do we do now? And processing the big changes before we I'm a bit more of a panic, then think, and then be like, right, okay, we can do this. So for me, it was a little bit slower. But yeah, I don't think that our relationships have been affected by it. I think we've just had to do it in a different way and perhaps more intentional. So for me, it was our Tuesday discipleship group went online, which, I'll be honest, numbers haven't been great. So usually at our discipleship group, we probably get around 12, and it's been a lot fewer. So I know the last session we did, it was literally the adult and Chloe. So Chloe had a whole discipleship session to herself. But it's been more intentional. So online youth work is hard for multiple reasons. They could have a parent carer sat with them, or no internet or anything like that. But it's so we found really helpful. So I write to the young people. So I've done 3 rounds at the moment of writing to every young person I work with, and kind of making it personal. So saying, how are you getting on with such and such? And I know where they're at and what their hobbies are. So taking an interest in those. but kind of keeping them accountable. So Chloe, how are you getting on? You want to be a youth worker one day. What steps are you taking right now? But so we have group chats as well, and it's kind of just moving it on there. So it's relationships are still there, but it's different, and the conversations probably aren't as in depth as what they would be in person, but they're still very much there and still just different, just changed, but still there.
Chloe, from your point of view, how was it when we were all told to stay in our homes, and you and other young people in your group are used to having this fluid relationship where you see people and maybe even bump into people in the village as well and see your youth worker? How was it for you not being able to have that kind of one-to-one contact?
It was hard at first, but then it sort of like I started to understand a bit more. I started to like get along with it a bit more, and then I started like still having conversations with Hannah, and obviously receiving them postcards. Like that sort of like reminded me of the bond that we've still got. So it like still like cheered me up whenever I received one.
I can imagine getting something, if you're anything like my children, getting something through the post is actually quite a special thing because it's so rare, but actually that has another whole dimension to the relationship, that somebody's not just emailed but has put something down either on a paper or in a little goodie bag and sent it. I imagine that was quite a powerful expression of the relationship.
Yeah.
I think out of everything we've done, how are we 4 months in now? I think out of everything I've done, that has had the most feedback from young people saying, I really enjoyed that, I really liked that. And for me, I think that's so simple for me to sit and write. I mean, it takes a long time to write however many cards and things, but to sit and write, I think that just takes me back to the basics of if they're just happy with receiving a handwritten postcard, which shows that I care about them, that I'm still thinking about them, that I've not gone anywhere. I just think, is that not the foundation of what youth groups should be and what youth ministry should be to me? Is if a postcard means that much, but again, it's relationship, isn't it? Which,
I think it's quite interesting because I guess over this time, I've personally seen people crave relationship, that connection with that authentic connection with other people that can only be real, I guess, on a face-to-face way. So we've seen lots of people kind of break lockdown or whatever it is in order to be able to have that relationship. And I partly wonder if that one of the reasons that young people have struggled is because actually being online is not an authentic way to build a relationship. So the fact that we go back to basics and we write letters and we make phone calls and whatever is actually saying, hey, I notice you. I'm not just going to notice you on a big screen, but I'm going to notice you personally. So it's almost kind of like when we come out of lockdown, people will have that, I really want to connect with so-and-so. I really want to connect with Hannah and see how she's doing, and let's just build on that. So I think lockdown has been great in that sense. We really now understand that, or people more understand, actually relationship is so central to who we are. Definitely.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I don't know if others have connected with some of the resources coming out and some of the conversations that are going on online at the moment, just about youth ministry and the importance of the relationship over the programme, which of course we all know, but sometimes we need those kind of big smack in the face realizations that relationship really is crucial. You know, scrap your program. You have to scrap your program now. You can't do it. Whatever you planned, you can't do it. And I know for some people that's really unsettling and that's really unnerving. And if you like to have all your ducks in line and everything sorted out, that can be a really anxious place to be, and sort of disabling place to be. I was going to do these things, but now I cannot. But I know so many people, and it sounds like, Hannah, you're definitely one of them, who after facing that, quickly asked yourself the question, what can I do? Not what can't I do, but what can I do? And I'm not limited just to an email, or I'm not limited just to a Zoom conversation. And I think a lot of people have jumped to those things, but haven't necessarily asked the questions, what else can I do? And I've heard more and more stories recently of people doorstep visiting and how powerful that has been, and how sometimes they have, you know, I'm going to visit, 20 young people this afternoon, and then ended up visiting 2 because the conversations on the doorsteps, are too precious just to say, hello, just wanted to see if you're all right, because the relationship is the important bit. And time and authenticity, all those things can't be done with a fleeting visit. But what can I do, I think, is one of the key questions as far as youth ministry and the survival of youth ministry through this time. And even as we come out of lockdown, yes, there are more things that we can do, and we will be able to meet back up, and there will be a time when we'll be able to open the church hall again and have as many as you want to come in and do socials and all that stuff. And I guess the question there isn't just what can I do, is what should I do, or what is the best thing that I can do that will nurture these relationships. So I've talked a long time there. Does anyone want to come in on the back of that? Is that helpful, or is that not?
Yeah, it's definitely that. So my online youth work, what is in place of our weekly youth group and fortnightly discipleship group, the number of young people coming and engaging with that is really quite low. And for weeks I was like, what are we doing wrong? Why are they not coming? But actually, I was watching the Youthscape Now What conference over the weekend, and they were talking about now we're suddenly invading what was a very young person's space with their technology and their phones. And why would you want to sit on technology when that's all you do all day during lockdown? And so to me, it was the what can I do? So for me, it was writing the letters, but I'm very relational anyway. So it's like I do birthday cards to every young person, and we have the messages already set up anyway. So it's kind of right, now's my time to shine. Now's this time of the groups we've already got set up and the cards we've already got set up. Now's the time for them to really show up. And for me, it's been definitely actually taking it back to the basics of why do they belong? What is it that they come for? And why are they not joining on a Friday night? And taking that back to when we do start back. So at the moment, we've got no date for starting back youth groups because I'm aware that we can with 15. But at the moment, it's the young people don't want to come until we're all back together. So we looked at small groups, and only 3 said definitely. And Chloe was one of them, but only 3 out of however many we have said definitely. And when I was like, but why? Said, because we want to be together. We can talk to you online, and we can talk to you in the postcards. And one thing that me and an intern last year, Emma, and we made journals for every young person that were personalised with their names and song lyrics and Bible verses and prayers for them that we gave them all last year. And that hopefully they've been helpful over this last 4 months. And so I do a daily video with sometimes it's a quote, sometimes it's a Bible verse, sometimes it's topical, for them to kind of a bit of input. So they're still getting the input they'd get, they're still getting the relationship in a different way. So yeah.
Yeah. An interesting point from Graham on the chat, saying that for some young people, they might feel that online is the most authentic that they can be. I know we say that often the online stuff can't be as authentic, it can't be as real, it can't be, which I think I sign up to that, but I also recognize there are stories coming out of young people who, because it's online, have been able to open up more and have been able to deepen those relationships with a youth worker or a significant other. Any examples or comments on that from others?
Yeah, we've had one new young person join another group that I do at a different church. We've had one new young person join online, never met me before, never met any of the other young people. He's new in the village. And yeah, but I think it comes down to what's your youth work normally like. So mine is quite relational anyway. It's quite I mean, I always say to my youth worker friends, which Chloe won't mind me sharing, I always say, why do I always get the tears at youth group? Why have I always got this going on and this emotional thing going on? And I think it's because I am so open with it that I'm not saying that if you're a youth worker and you've not got young people crying that you're doing it wrong or anything like that. But we're very relational because that's what my youth work was like. So that's what my aim was, that actually the young people find it quite easy to open up. Not all of them, obviously. But I found the opposite. I found them really struggling, to be honest, over things like this. Messenger, yeah, like chats, yeah, but anything like this, no. But again, I think that's because my youth work is naturally quite relational anyway. But yeah, I think I've seen amazing stories coming out of it, and I think even with adults doing Alpha at the moment is hugely increased in number of things. But yeah, so it can definitely work. I've not seen any myself, but
yeah. A question to probably start to come into land on our conversation. What tips or advice that would we give to youth workers watching this who are engaging in this conversation, some of whom will be completely on board with this relational discipleship and will be doing a form of that? What are the super important things that we would say are important to get right? What are the is it things like sharing food? Some people say that food is like one of the most important ingredients in youth ministry. It's probably not far off the truth. But also like the discipleship side of things, encouraging, a hunger for the Bible and for prayer and for seeing miracles and seeing healings and walking, expecting to hear God. What other things do we think actually these are super important that we would encourage anyone listening to get right, to put in place, to grow in? Any thoughts?
I was going to let Hannah go first.
Yeah, I think it's meeting the young people where they're at. So don't assume you know where they're at by any means. Don't assume anything. And for me, the big thing I think I was saying at the start is I don't just want to know them on a Friday at 5 o'clock for an hour and a half. I want to know what I invest in their life, not just them for youth group. And it's discipleship is a life thing, I think, and it's journeying alongside them and not assuming anything about where they're at. And I think that's a massive thing of saying that I don't just want you to come on a Friday and enjoy yourself. I want to invest in everything that's going on. So we've got quite a lot of young people who've got poorly family members or rely on the food bank and things. And so for me, it's a young person coming to youth group with no food, and one of the volunteers nip into Asda and they go home with a load of food. And I mean, that's one example, but it's the whole life. It's not just their faith journey. So that's, yeah, don't assume anything and meet them where they're at, but also be willing to be open, authentic, with good boundaries. I think everything we discussed in being as authentic as possible and being as real, and not having so before, when Chloe was saying like she sees me as a bit of a parent thing, I was a little bit like, oh, like it's a hard one, isn't it, in that I don't want them to be relying on me. So I want Chloe to know that there's a whole team of people who love and care for her, not just me, and being vulnerable in that sense with the team and things. So yeah, definitely journeying. It's a lifelong journey, and accountability, not just for the young people, but for me as well. So in terms of Chloe keeping me accountable, Hannah, you said you were going to do this, but also with colleagues and making sure I'm sharing and I'm accountable to them as well.
Chloe, could you tell us a little bit about what youth ministry might look like as far as you know, sort of going forward from this? I know, or I've heard that Hannah was starting to do some outdoor group sessions, chance to just meet in that physical space. But have you any ideas or even any suggestions of yourself of how Hannah could or should work in the future as far as building these relationships up?
I don't know.
We'll turn Hannah off for a little bit and then you can say possibly you're saying then don't change anything, because Hannah's obviously got a strong value for being real, being authentic and building those relationships, and you don't want to see that change. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Dawn, how about you? Some thoughts to come in as far as moving forward and encouraging people to be relational in their discipleship, sort of out of the end of lockdown?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess one of my top tips is really get to know your team. People grow with stories. So if God has moved in your life, share that story, not only with your young people, but with your team as well. So it's about authentically walking with your team, not just kind of oh, I'll see you at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening before the young people come in at 7:30, and we'll have a quick prayer. And it's really getting to know your team. Who are they? What makes them tick? Where has God moved in their lives? Helping them grow in confidence so that they can then share their stories with young people as well, so that the young person just has a whole host of people authentically supporting them and journeying with them. And that's so important as well, that kind of relationship with the team and with the young people, so you become a very strong unit. I think that's really, really important.
Cool. I think for me, some of the things that I think can really nurture this kind of relationships are the shared experiences that you can create in youth work. I think sometimes we can get fixed on, like a teaching theme, or we're going to cover this, we'll have this game, and we'll do these things, we'll do these activities, and it becomes quite program centric. But I think for me, the social times are often the most valuable bits of youth work. I remember in a youth group I used to run in York, it was like over an hour and a half, but the first half an hour was always just social, games, chat. And I would inevitably have people on the team who are like, oh, if we haven't got enough time in our program, we should take some time off of that beginning. We could do the extra activity if we started a bit earlier. And I'm like, I would always fight for that half hour, because it seemed to be that was the most important bit of the relational discipleship time, where as people came in, you could meet them where they were at. You could have a little chat on the side if they looked, discouraged, or you knew something had been going off and you wanted that catch-up conversation. So for me, those times are really important to protect, but also just the shared experiences. What could I organise that would create a wonderful chance for young people to be real, to share together, whether it's like a bonfire, late at night and everyone's sitting around, of course, risk assessments and fire. Hannah would be all over that with but I was sure she would still do it, or going for a walk, or having a trip out somewhere, organising those times when it's not just back-to-back activity, there's space. So things like bowling are actually good. They're classic youth work activities, but bowling is great because you're engaged in activity for like 30 seconds and then you sit down, and it's that chat time that can be so precious before it's your turn to go up again. Instead of like going to the cinema, where you can't have that time during the movie unless you scheduled it in at the end of it. So yeah, it's about thinking about, what is it that could produce the space for relationships to grow. And my last idea is actually having a big meal. Sometimes just scrap your youth program, your games, your activities, your talks, or whatever else you might have if you're a church-based worker, and you've got a packed program. Actually, once in a while, just say, we're not going to do that. We're going to have a meal for the whole time. And we'll ask maybe some of the leaders or even some of the parents to come and serve at the tables and bring food around. And there'll be no other agenda apart from every sort of few minutes or whatever, we're going to move seats so we can talk to somebody else and encourage those relationships. But yes, keep your ideas coming on the conversation, even if you're not watching this live. The comment section stays live, and I know that ideas can be posted afterwards. So keep your ideas coming in. It's been a really helpful conversation to me. It's reignited my fire for this kind of youth ministry, and I reflect back over the conversations and the one-to-ones that I've had. And they're precious relationships that we can have. But Dawn, I'm going to hand back to you to give us some kind of a summary and to wind up our conversation today.
I was just going to say, it's been amazing. It's been a really great conversation. We really hope that this has really fired you up to kind of the people that are watching to just really think to yourself, what can I do? What can I do? And what do I need to let go of? And how do I need to reshape and reframe what I'm going to do from September? We're encouraging people to really kind of rest in August and to enter into September feeling fully rested, not feeling like we're completely just like, we'll get through the summer and eventually just rest. So these conversations are going to change a little bit. We've got another one next week, and then throughout the month of August we're going to do one short reflection and then one full conversation. So you have one full conversation once every fortnight, and we'll post those on there so that you can see these. But very much just use this season just to rest, really just kind of reflect and say, God, where do you need us? Where do you need us to move? So we're just going to finish in prayer, and then I'll dismiss you all. So Lord, thank you so much for this time together. Thank you for the precious conversations that we had. Lord, will you just help us, help guide us in this next season? Nudge us towards the people that you want us to have relationships with, great relationships with. Help us build team. Help us have great relationships with young people that we work with. And Lord, we pray for those young people that have potentially been on the edge during this season, that have desperately wanted to connect. Lord, we pray that you'll help us find a way to reconnect with those people, or to even meet new people that have been there peering in. So Lord, thank you for this time together. Amen. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.